Sorry, I apologize. I sincerely apologize for the delay. Without further ado, sorry, I want to share with you hopefully just a few ideas. Before we start, just one brief thought on the fact that tonight is Yom Yerushalayim. You know, there's a beautiful Tosfos in Baba Basra, Chof Aleph Amud Aleph. The Gemara in Baba Basra talks about, it's an incredible sugya that discusses the origin of the chinuch system. Talks about how, so Rabbi Birnbaum, the Gemara says that he should be remembered for good because of the fact that he went around all of the cities and he saw there was a problem, and there was a problem. Well, at least he had identified the fact that people who didn't have good educators at home were stuck, and they weren't getting good education. He set up a school system. What used to happen was they went through a number of stages, and it says, so the other people thought it was that it only comes through you. In other words, if a person has a has a father who teaching, that was good. That's what happened, and if not, it didn't happen. He instituted they should establish people who would teach children in Yerushalayim. My Drosha was the source of the pasuk. It says Kimitzion Teitzei Sora, because Torah will come out of Yerushalayim. And Tosfos says here, what is it about Yerushalayim? Why did they establish teachers specifically in Yerushalayim? Says Tosfos, because Lefisha Ha'aroya Kedusha Gedola, because people who will go to Yerushalayim would see a great Kedusha, the Kohanim Oskim Ba'avoda, and Kohanim involving themselves in the Avoda, Ha'imachavin Liba Yoseli Yerushalayim, Belilmo Torah. Through that, he would be able to learn and be able to have Yerushalayim, fear of heaven, as it says in the Sifri, Laman Tilma, the year of Agom, etc., etc. And Tosfos brings that same thing was with Ma'aser Sheni. Ma'aser Sheni was brought to Yerushalayim, and the whole purpose was, or part of the purpose was, that people would bring the Ma'aser to Yerushalayim, and they would see people being involved. Kulam oiskim b'meleches shamayim u'ba'avoda. They would involve themselves in meleches shamayim, the work of heaven, involved in the Beis Hamikdash. Hayagam hu mechaven Yerushalayim. He himself would also be involved in Yerushalayim and involve himself in the Torah. It's an incredibly beautiful representation of what Yerushalayim le'osid lova and Yerushalayim was, Yerushalayim will be, and the connection is obvious, because on a day when we celebrate the fact that we are once again able to go to the coastal, we're once again able to get an insight, a tiny insight into the Kedusha of Yerushalayim. Of course, it is only a tiny insight, but nevertheless, it reminds ourselves. We should remind ourselves on this day the fact that Yerushalayim is Ora Shel Olam, the light of the world, and that's so beautifully represented in the Gemara, how people can go to Yerushalayim, stream to Yerushalayim, and be able to thereby derive sense of spirituality and holiness from it. Now, 4 ideas I'd like to share with you, hopefully, on the parasha. The first is from the Panim Yofos. Panim Yofos says that there is something, if like a dichotomy, something difficult to understand in a sense, about the whole process of the counting in this week's parasha. Su'es Rosh, you should lift up the heads, if you like, of the Bnei Yisrael. Mispar Shemos Kol V'Chol Gugolosom, Pasuk base, right at the beginning of the parasha. Every male according to their heads, right, and they have to give the shkolim. Now, the issue is that, of course, Osalim knows, we know they're not allowed to count, and that's why they had to give the shkolim, because that was how they were counted, right? That's the whole idea. The Panim Yofos says that what is the issue with counting? The issue with counting is because we are one. When you count something, you're separating it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. But we're not, we're one, right? Yisrael is nefesh achas. As Rashi says in Bereshis, Shivim nefesh, the 70. Why does it say 70 nefesh? It's in the singular. The answer is because when Yaakov goes down to Mitzrayim, they're connected. Everyone is connected to Hashem. Hashem is one. And therefore we derive from that, if you like, so to speak, the fact that we are one as a people, as opposed to the nations of the world, where it's all about dispersion. That's the whole Dor HaFloga after Migdal Bovel. Everything is dispersed, everyone is separated. And therefore there's an issue, because when we count it, that naturally causes some form of separation. And he says that's a Midas Hadin there, because they've been counted, they're being separated. And we're supposed to be together. So therefore, what he says is that that is why it says, let me just find the right page. When Elakach, he says, when Hashem commanded to count the Bnei Yisrael, we understand the reasons, as Rashi says, in order to, the fact that we're cherished in front of Hashem, that's why Hashem counts us. But it says, that they have to be uplifted. To lift them up once again, to connect to the oneness of Hashem, the unity that they should be. And the idea is that is why it says the word su'u es rosh, to lift up. That even though there is a necessity of if you like, of a separation, and that will inevitably occur as a result of the counting, and there are reasons for that. Hashem showing His love for Bnei Yisrael. Nevertheless, it's essential that we reconnect once again to that whole that unity that exists, the unity that we connect through the notion of Hashem Echad, and that's why it says Su'u Es Rosh, because we have to be lifted up once again to that point of singular connection that we have. And therefore you see, and this goes, if you like, through the parsha in many ways, that there is a concept of dividing and reuniting. That sometimes we do need to be divided, and we have to have a recognition that we are individuals, the fact that we have different roles and different tasks. That's the concept of the degolim, the idea of the different flags and the different groupings and everything else. But at the same time, it's Su'u Es Rosh. Never forget where you're from. Never forget that we are one and we are united in the connection that we have, which is being uplifted and looking up to Shemayim. This is represented in a similar way by a beautiful idea from the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes is going on Perek Beis, Posuk Beis, where it says, Ish al diglova osos lebeis avosom yachanu bnei Yisrael meneged soviv lo'el moed yachanu. That everyone has to encamp by their correct flags, That is the purpose. That is what is going on. That's the idea of them being connected in this way. Says the Sfas Emes, the Medrash connects this word degel to digloi olai ahavu. Right? Now, dilug really means to skip. That's what it means, to jump, to skip, right? That's what it goes, right? Medalgin, to skip, medalig al-harim, whatever, it's to skip. That's what it means, right? What does that to do? What has that got to do? What is the connection between digloy olai avo, dilugoi? So he says that the Medrash says, that there was a desire to connect and almost be like the Malachei Hasharis. The Medrash says, the digloy olai avo, afilo odom yoshiv osik b'Torah, or medalig mehalacha la'alocha pasuk l'pasuk. Even a person who sits on the Torah and he skips from one halacha to another, one pasuk to another, Hashem says that person is cherished before me, and that's digloy olai avo, the idea of skipping and the idea of jumping, that because it causes a closeness to Hashem. And when it says that when Hashem appeared on Har Sinai, so they descended with him all of these malachim, huge numbers of malachim, and they saw the Bnei Yisrael who were set out according to their degolim, and they wanted the degolim too, and they wanted the same concept as well. What is the power of the degolim? So the Sfas Emes says that Hashem promised Avraham Avinu, Koyi Ezarecha, that your descendants will be like you. They will be like you. The concept of the flags on a simple level is so that everyone should know their shevet. They should know where they are. They should know where they're connected to. And therefore, he says, similarly, that there was also an idea and a connection that existed with the flag back to the ovos. That's where the flag is the shevet, going back to the shvatim, and Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov as well. And he says, we're not able to serve Hashem on the level of angels in this world, the level of malachim. What we can do is desire to do the will of Hashem properly. And therefore he says, even though the flags are not there, we're not the highest level, we don't reach the level of the malachim, they will misaveh, the Medrash says, they wanted to reach the level of the Malachei Hashores, who it seems the Medrash understands have the same idea and the same concept of the flag. Nevertheless, even though they weren't able to reach that, it was nevertheless possible through these degolim through the connection they represented to Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov and the Shlotim themselves, to be medalig, that the Bnei Yisrael were able to, if you like, skip above themselves. That's what he says it means when it says dilugo shebnei Yisrael yichol nitzvos listabek mokum eliam af shaloi ba'adroga rak shaloi lebo la'avos sheshim esprach v'shevrotzon yochel listabek af ma she'eno kedai, that they're able to connect on a level that really they weren't really worthy of, and that was in the merit of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So in other words, what the beautiful idea of the Sfas Emes is, the word degel being the play on the word for ledaleg, to skip, meaning that you have every member of Klal Yisrael, each ordered according to their flags, right? According to their flags. What does the flag represent? The flag represents the fact that you might feel that you're nothing and that you're an ordinary person, right? And you're just here down here, but you look up and you see the flag. What does the flag remind you of? It reminds you that you can jump, that you can skip beyond much, much higher than the level you are in this world if you connect to something higher. If you connect to a higher cause, a higher purpose, that's what a flag represents, right? Even in contemporary times, right? That's why you have a flag, because a flag reminds you, that's why people wave a flag at critical moments, because they look at the flag and they think, wow, I know who I am. I have an identity. There's something bigger than me, something bigger. And here that greater something, he says, the flags represent each of the Shvatim. So it's the greater connection that I have to my ancestors, to Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, which brings them to skip far beyond, much higher than they would be otherwise, to reach much higher levels. So that is the idea. That is the idea of the flags, he says. So that's the Sfas Emes. Now the Al-Sheikh picks up on a pasuk which a number of Mefarshim struggle with, and that is the pasuk of Perek Aleph pasuk Nun Dalet. So just a few pasukim before that. And the question is, we've got all the countings of each, the accounting for each of the Shvatim, and the tribe of Levi, the Matei Levi, accounted separately, and their roles are different. And then it says, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael, and the b'nei Yisrael did, K'choil asher tzivah Hashem es Moshe kenosu. They did everything according to everything that Hashem commanded Moshe. That's what they did. Kenosu, that's what they did. So the question is, what exactly is this pasuk for? What does it mean? What does it mean that they did everything Hashem commanded, right? It can't be that it's referring to the counting, because it already says before, Kasher tzivah Hashem es Moshe vayifkedein, right? It says that, where is it? I think much earlier on in the beginning, I think. Kasher, exactly, pasuk Yotes. Kasher tzivah, right? Hashem es Moshe vayifkedeim, and he counted them in Var Sinai. So it can't be referring to the counting, right? And also he says, the Al-Sheikh HaKadosh says, that it's not referring to, what does it mean, the Bnei Yisrael? The counting was done with Moshe, through Moshe and Aaron. So what did the Bnei Yisrael do? What was their role, right? And if you're going to say that it's going on the next bit, which is the encampment by the flags, they haven't yet been commanded to do that. So how can it say Vayasu? They did it, they hadn't yet done it, right? So what exactly are they doing here? And also, what does it say again? Kenosu. Vayasu is not Kenosu, and so they did. So this is a difficult pasuk to understand. So the Al-Sheikh's approach is that this pasuk is going back on pasuk Nun Beis. Pasuk Nun Beis says, "V'chanu b'nei Yisrael ish al machanehu, v'ish al diglo letzivosam." They encamped in the right places, v'ish al diglo letzivosam, and each one according to his flag. Now, clearly, they hadn't yet actually put it into practice. They hadn't yet put it into practice. They're going to be instructed in the next parsha how they are to divide themselves according to their shvatim. So he says that what the message here is, that the Gemara says in Kiddushin that a good thought, Hashem considers it, good intention, considers it the same as an action. So he says that when a person is commanded to do something from Hashem, and he accepts upon himself to do that activity, to do that mitzvah, and then he does it, actually carries it out, there are two actions that take place. Number one is the Kabbalah, is the acceptance, the decision to do something. That's number one. And the second is the actual action. And that's what it means when he says, Vayasu b'nei Yisrael k'choil asher tzivah Hashem es Moshe, that Hashem had told them, v'chanu. Hashem had just said, Moshe Rabbeinu had said to them, through Hashem, from Hashem, right? That you will encamp. This is what you'll need to do, right? Okay, this is what's going to happen, right? Yuridu Asalaviem, V'chanu b'nei Yisrael, they're going to encamp by their encampments. And at that moment it says, Vayasu, they did. All they had was just the instruction. They were being told, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to live. They didn't know how. They didn't know the details. They didn't know the order. But they already accepted it upon themselves to do the right thing and to do the right thing in the right order. And that is because, says the Al-Sheikh, why did they accept it? What drove them to accept it, even though they hadn't been told the details? Because they were B'nai Yisrael. Vayasu B'nai Yisrael, because they were B'nai Yisrael. Because Hashem, with the B'nai Yisrael, with us, Hashem considers a good thought as an action. So that's what happens to them here. It doesn't apply to the rest of the nations of the world. And that's why it says, Moshe, even though Moshe had not yet commanded the B'nai Yisrael, all that they had been told was just the instruction that they're going to encamp in the right places. And after that, it says, Kain Osu. So they acted. So they actually acted in actuality, in reality, when they were commanded for the encampment of the Degolim. So that what you have effectively is there's two stages. There's the acceptance to do the right thing, and then there's the actual carrying it out. And that's what this possibly means. So in a sense, I think this connects a little bit with the idea of the Sfas Emes on the Degolim themselves. The Bnei Yisrael here in this parsha are being expected not just to organize themselves, not just to be counted, not just to be instructed where to live. You're going to be there, you're going to be there, you're going to be there. They're instructed to change the way their thought process operates. And that's what this parsha really is. It's an object lesson in the way their descendants are also meant to live their lives. So that they're meant to live in these groupings with aspirations, with high aspirations for the values set in place by their ancestors. That's the Dega. They're meant to live in such a way whereby they put into practice, they live as they are supposed to live, and they also go through a process of acceptance, of an understanding as to why they need to live in this way. And that's the two stages. That's the Vayasu, the acceptance that they will live in a certain way. And the final idea I want to share with you, which is, again, it really follows all a similar theme, the idea of what they come together as a people to achieve, is Rabbi Aaron Kotler has a piece in Mishnah Rabbi Aaron on the concept of the Mila, the significance of order, of Seder. The Torah devotes a huge amount of space to order, to how people or things are supposed to be placed in order. And he says that you see from here that the concept of and the details that applies to the groupings in the flags, encampments, etc., and the way they're grouped around each flag, and the way they encamp and the way they journey, right? When and how the journeying of the Mishkan is meant to take place. Similarly, through the whole of most of the second half of Parshas Shmos, and like everything is ordered, everything is specific, everything is in detail. He says you have to understand that the generation of the Midbar, the Toras Bamidbar, had very, very few distractions. What did they have to do? They just had to, they had very little things they had to do, right? Their clothes didn't wear out. They had their food min hashemayim. They had very little things they actually had to carry out. And nevertheless, despite the fact that there were so few distractions, they had to be told in great detail, this is how you're meant to order your lives. You're meant to live in an orderly fashion in this way, so that everything you do and every step you take is guided, is al pi Hashem. Al pi Hashem echanu, al pi Hashem yisol, right? Even though they should have been the people who were the most focused. They should have been the least, right? The people who least needed all of this order, if you think about it. Then they're covered by the Ananei HaKol. What do they have to do? They just follow the Ananei HaKol. They just go in the way that everyone's going, right? Why do they have to be so ordered? Says Rabbi Aaron Kotler, L'lamed l'doros, to teach future generations, ki kol inyonei kedusha va'avoda dorshim seder. If you want to achieve things in life, you want to achieve kedusha, you want to achieve avodas Hashem, you have to be masuda. You have to be organized in your life. V'inyonei hakedusha yoseh gedolim alulim nishapech chas v'shalom meheda seder nochem. The greatest aspiration, says Rabbi Aaron, in holiness, in avodas Hashem, can be overturned just through disorderliness. We're all sometimes disordered, right? But if we don't order our lives, we don't live a life where we have a sense of like, okay, this is what I'm doing today. This is what I have to do this evening. on a level of what I'm supposed to do in terms of spirituality and living an orderly life, then the greatest aspirations will stay aspirations. They won't actually play out in practice. He says that when it comes to at the end of the parsha, Perek Daled Pasuk Yud Ches, says Al Tachrisu. Right at the end. Al Tachrisu Shevet HaKahasi, right? Let them not be cut off. Mitoch Halavim. Why are they going to be cut off? Right? Chazal say because everyone wanted to be zocher to carry the Aron, and they used to push one another, and they came close to the Aron, and the Aron would actually, some of them would die. That's what the Medrash says, because the slightest touch, as we find with Uzzah, was punished, etc., etc. We know that people are going to come too close to the Aron, and they would perish, right? The Aron is the highest point of kedusha and of bracha, right? And therefore, he says like this. Oved Edom, the Gemara says, as it says in Tanakh, right? Who looked after the Aron in his house in Nach, right? It says that Oved Edom Gitti, when he brought the Aron back, right? When David HaMelech brings the Aron back, etc., etc., and he was in his house for a number of years, and his house was blessed, right? Because of the Aron. And nevertheless, the highest and most kadosh people amongst the Bnei Yisrael, the most chosen of the most chosen shevet, could lose their lives through coming too close and not actually and touching the Aron when they shouldn't. Why? Only because of a chisaron seder, of a lack of orderliness, right? But Bnei Kahas, they were most nefesh on the Aron, and even so, and even though it caused them to, some of them died, they pushed to become close to the Aron. They understood the tremendous schar, okay, but nevertheless they came to some confusion, because each one said, I want to carry here, I want to carry here, and that's what led to some form of lightheaded or kalastration in some way, some sort of zilzal, cheapening of the Aron in some way, and therefore the greatest kedusha, the greatest role, the holiest role of all, was overturned sometimes. Al tachrisu shevet hakahasi, that sometimes the opposite happened to them, right? That they would end up dying as a result of the lack of seder. And he goes on to describe in many other ways as well. He gives other examples as well of this idea, and he says that the idea. What does it mean when it says? Just to finish with this, the pasuk says in Yeshayahu, what does it mean? Says, Chazal say this in the Sifri, Godel HaShalom, Shalom is great, Sheshakol Keneged Kol Ma'aseh Bereishis, that it is equal to the whole of creation. What is Shalom? What is really Shalom? What is really peace? Peace is equilibrium. Peace is that everyone is in the right place. Everything is in the right place, in the right order. The whole Bria, the whole of creation, is Masuda, is ordered and is organized in the right way. And that is what it means when we say Yotze Ara V'Rei Choshech Oseh Shalom, because the greatest form of peace is Yotze Ara V'Rei Choshech. It's day, it's night. We have order in the world. That is the greatest form of Shalom. And without that, Chas v'Shalom, the world can be destroyed. The world can be destroyed because there's nothing to keep it in order. There is nothing greater. He says that's what it means when we say Oseh Shalom V'Rei Es Hakol. Because without this orderliness, without this shalom, the highest sense of orderliness, there is no existence at all. So you won't get your Beres HaKol. Everything only comes into existence because of this. And that's how it is. Everything is in the right place and everything is in the right order. I think it's a very powerful perspective on the whole of the sense of Seder in the Torah and how the Torah is so particular about Seder. Because ultimately, if we want to lead our lives in a way that is consistent with the Torah, we have to realize that we also have to be ordered in our lives. And even if we sometimes suffer, all of us, from disorderliness, it's certainly an aspiration to try and aspire to. And I wish you all a very good Shabbos. Apologies again for the slight delay.
Good Shabbos, Kaya.
Good Shabbos.